guess so.
This is exciting. Are you excited? I'm yelling. I'll edit that part, the yelling out. Chris Gelb. So Chris is somebody who I heard play and does not wreck the music, and I would like to ask him questions like, how do you not wreck the music? And how do you serve the music, and why is it so wonderful when you play the drums, so that I can relay this information to other drummers. So instead of being like, what are you doing? I'll say, hey, look at Chris.
Well, I think it takes, for me, I approach it, I guess playing music in general, I find myself more interested in hearing what else is going on around me than what I'm doing. So I try to, the way I think about it is I want to be able to hear everything and kind of play off of what other people are doing. So
it's very selfless.
I love listening to music, so I like to be kind of surrounded by it and serve the music in that way, accompany others for the most part. I think that would be my approach, I believe. I don't know.
How did you end up this way? Okay, let's talk about your background for a moment. You mostly grew up on Terry Bozzio videos?
Exactly. No, almost. Growing up, I was like, well, my parents are jazz musicians, so I was always kind of around.
Alright, this is over. Anytime you hear that, my dad was John Coltrane, so...
Yeah, no. He wasn't John Coltrane, but he was a saxophonist, so... No. But I grew up around that. I'm around music, and not necessarily the older stuff, which I played mostly up in New York, but I'm surrounded by jazz, so as soon as I hit middle school, I did not want to be associated with jazz at all, so I just listened to rock and roll, and I was a huge progressive metal fan, and somehow I found myself playing 20s and 30s jazz, and I fell in love with it, so...
That seems to beg the question, how did that happen?
Well, I started, my aunt, who's lived here for many decades, she had discovered Vince Giordano and the Nighthawks and started taking me to Vince's shows before I even moved here. And when I moved here, I started going to see him more often, and I kind of, I'd never heard this down. I'm from North Carolina originally, and I'd never heard this music played live in my entire life. And all of a sudden, here it is, and it was, it was like something, for something being so old, it was like so new sounding to me, because I never heard it live before. It's such a different experience than hearing it on the old recordings.
Can you hear drums on old recordings, and kind of have you developed your ears to be able to figure out what in the world's going on?
Especially if you can find videos of anyone doing that old style, the best is, I think, something that I've kind of ripped a lot of stuff from is the Louis Armstrong, and I think it's Copenhagen in 1933. And if I'm not mistaken, it's probably one of the earliest actual live, not lip syncing to recorded music, I think, and you can see the drummer doing everything.
Wow.
And so you can't necessarily hear everything he's doing, but that way you can kind of see oh, maybe that's what's happening in the spaces where I'm not hearing a splash cymbal or a wood block or a china cymbal or something. So.
Right. So then, would you say you're self-taught in this, or do you?
No, I mean, so I guess shortly, about a year after I'd been in New York, I met Paul Wells, who plays with Vince Giordano, and he kind of showed me the ropes on some stuff, and I started playing with Vince pretty shortly after that, and he's definitely the encyclopedia on this music, and so he knows what you need to be doing, and kind of shows you the basics. And that was kind of my introduction to it. And then I started searching myself for other things and stuff that I liked. But I'd say those two guys kind of introduced me to it.
Yeah.
But there's others I've seen in town. I know Rob Garcia, who also played with them. He's got a great sound for that, and so I think just seeing them, I kind of picked up on some stuff and ran with it.
Do you need a mustache to play this music?
It doesn't hurt. It's helped me kind of progress in my career.
Do you need a hat? Let's talk about the gear for a second. What is this?
Sure. It's a 30s, 1930s Slingerland. It's called a juvenile, which was like a child's drum. So it's a little 12-inch guy, but this was kind of my Subway friendly snare drum.
What kind of wood is it made out of?
It's fun. Well, it's made of mahogany, and it has maple reinforcement rings on the inside. But most importantly, it's mahogany. They're usually pretty nice and lightweight and woody and dark. Well, if I were to do the typical kind of press roll style, this comes out of a marching tradition. That's the basic sound. You have like a wood block, so you can kind of get a wood block sound. Or you also hear people just play on the rim, so. You can get a couple different other sounds out of the drum. I mean, another in the same vein of the press rolls, kind of for like a dirge, or you'll hear it a lot in Jelly Roll Morton. It could also be a tom-tom, but you'll hear. Or like a tom-tom groove, which is just playing quarter notes. Stuff like that.
Are you thinking of subdivisions? Are you thinking of... I mean, even when you play a quarter note, there's something happening. Curious, just if you don't mind demonstrating once again, say your Jelly Roll Morton tom-tom effect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, what's going on there? Or you don't even think about this?
With this stuff, I mean, with this style of music, I think something I really love about it is that it's got such a heavy 2-beat feel most of the time. Even if, say the tuba or bass saxophone or upright bass are playing all 4 quarter notes in a beat, it's still just like this. You'll hear the drummer a lot, especially in the Jelly Roll Morton stuff. The bass drum is even in 4/4 sections, and this also can get flipped around, but you'll hear like the bass or bass instrument playing 4 beats and the bass drum still just playing a 2-beat feel. So it's just like got this.
But dial back. What do we mean by 1 beat or 2 beat or?
Basically, what I'm saying is I like to. I'm usually feeling a big 2-beat feel a lot of the time. Half notes, yeah. So even if we were doing the tom-tom beat. Even if the bass is going. Following that, I don't know. There's something super groovy about feeling it in 2 rather than feeling all of the 4 beats in the measure.
People get obsessed with this. They say, I mean, that's maybe another misconception. I don't know if I made the first one clear, but that old drumming is like the foundation of technique for new drumming. Mm-hmm. So that's why you would delve into the past. It's like your Moeller technique or your Gladstone, your freehand, all that stuff.
Sure.
Do you care about that, or it doesn't really?
I mean, it makes sense to me. I mean, I think what I like about this music too, and a lot of music that I play is usually pretty, you're supporting the beat for most of the time dancers. And so I think the beautiful thing about this music is that, I mean, it's so early on in drum set history. The drum set was just being invented, and it's like the drum set of the day back then is it's pretty far removed from what we have today. I mean, all the basics are there, but anyway, the technique for it is it's you got a lot of the stuff from the marching band tradition, but then all the groove stuff that you find, like the tom-tom thing, or doing the same on the wood block. I mean, those are just quarter notes, but within the context of the music, it adds so much, and it's just it adds a clear groove to the music. And I think through that, you learn all the just simple. You learn how to playing 4 quarter notes in a row. That's your job, and so you do it a lot, or you focus on how to make that sound good. And then, there's the next thing of the rolls. Mike in particular kind of turned me on to the idea of stop using a hi-hat on 2 and 4, or he even kind of inspired me to just stop using hi-hats in general. You don't have to carry them to the gig anymore, so it's great. There's something about the sound of letting the banjo or guitar take the backbeats. Mm-hmm. And you already have it happening on the other instruments you're playing, so sometimes it's just a little heavy, and the absence of it allows the music to breathe a bit. So I don't know. Yeah. So getting back to that, I think it just depends on exactly what era and decade we're talking about. And
so the materials of drumming. So you got, say you're playing with Vince Giordano, Mike Davis. You talked about these great band leaders in town here. What's on your drum kit? And you got some brushes, sticks, and all this, and this relates to the problem of what you're going to sound like because of the instruments you're choosing, and how to solve that.
Sure. One of the most played instruments, I feel like, in this older style of music is the snare drum and the bass drum, and both of those have developed so much over the past almost 100 years. Yeah. Wow. So anyway, but the materials that they are made of, but also just like the stylistic and kind of fad of the day, tuning wise and such, and size wise, is important. I find that the more modern drums, and then modern kind of styles of tuning, it's usually much higher than I'm used to regarding snare drum. Kind of a lower, dirtier, funkier sound has always that's where I've always kind of gravitated towards snare drum wise. Definitely drier. Any really high ringing frequencies can kind of bother me, or just distracts me when I'm playing. And the bass drum sound is really important to the music. And any of the really small, kind of like child-size bass drums.
Bebop.
Bebop. Yeah, sorry, I misspoke.
Collectible, very highly prized.
The 18-inch bass drums, and even 20-inch bass drums sometimes kind of lack the sound that I'm looking for, but something about getting it's a little counterintuitive. Yeah, it's got to be meaty and
big boy.
Strong, big boy, big jazz boy. But just having it's a little counterintuitive to, I mean, for most people that have gone to school for jazz drumming, especially in the past two or three decades, you know, the bass drum sound that this music requires is a little outside of what people think of when they think of a jazz bass drum. It's, you know, these people were using marching bass drums 26 at like the minimum.
Well, what's the role of the bass drum then?
Well, it helps amplifies the bass instrument, or you're kind of playing along with whatever bass instrument is there, or even I've played a few things with people around town where it's just me and a pianist playing stride, and you kind of lock in with the bass movement in the left hand, and it just helps like create this extra kind of, it's like it almost sounds as if the piano is making the sound. You want it to kind of just help push the beat out, and but yeah, just to create kind of like a nice pillow for everything to sit on top of. By itself, it might sound a little out of place and aggressive, but I think having the air moving and that kind of buoyant sound helps carry the band along.
Then cymbals.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on with the cymbals?
In general, especially with these old recordings, it also depends on who you're listening to, but for the most part, they're usually just so brash and bright sounding, kind of trashy on the recordings. And I think they're pretty heavy cymbals, which...
But you're not riding, like if you go to jazz school today, you learn the most important thing,
Sure.
might be your ride cymbal, and that doesn't...
Yeah, I mean, and once again, depending on what style you're going after, or like what specific years you're going after, like sound-wise, that can all change. But yeah, the ride cymbal pattern as we know it doesn't happen all that much. If you're wanting to play 20s and early 30s, sometimes you'll hear that pop up, and there's definitely some unsureness of exactly the first example of the so-called ride cymbal pattern.
Right.
But you know, you'll hear like swing beats in early like late 20s stuff.
The original Dixieland Jazz Band being the first jazz record.
Sure.
You know, and then how is that jazzy, or like is that more jazz than something which, you know, had less free-flowing animal breaks, or I don't know what's going on. It's insane that we kind of try to classify these things and like look historically, but I do think, like, as far as the role of especially the rhythm, and that kind of unbridled effect that they want in the music, translates to a lot of, and I think it comes from modern sensibilities trying to relate to the past rather than, like, it's really hard for us to get in a time machine and say, okay, you didn't hear Buddy Rich, so how do you know, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense.
No, I mean, I think so. I don't know, playing this music, I don't really think of it as jazz so much. Not, at least not in the, you know, the way that universities and I guess specifically universities kind of make you imagine or think, kind of tell you what jazz is, which, I mean, even in my college, we studied, you know, we were told, like, Louis Armstrong is really important, Bix Beiderbecke is really important, and then it's like, well, let's talk about, you know, John Coltrane, or Miles.
Where'd you go to school?
University of North Carolina at Greensboro. It's a great program, and I mean, I was grateful that we even were introduced to the earlier stuff, but you know, we didn't focus on it. There wasn't, at least I wasn't involved with playing any of that music, and it was more of just like, this is important. Now it influenced this next thing that maybe we were more used to teaching, and we're just more comfortable with teaching, and so hence I wasn't totally exposed to playing it or meeting people that really knew the style. But getting back to kind of thinking about this music, and I don't don't think about it as jazz. It feels, when I play it, I feel more like, I feel more like it's kind of the rock and roll of the 20s. It just feels like high energy, a little more aggressive, and the role of the drums for me is, it feels more like I'm playing a rock and roll beat, or just something that's just like hard driving, exciting, and I think modern jazz can be that, but as well, or like bebop drumming. But I've just never really felt comfortable in that position, and when I found this music, I was like, oh man, this kind of drumming, I can get down with this.
Yeah. So
I think just like the hard driving kind of energy behind it. It's kind of getting off topic a little bit, but anyway, I don't really think of it as jazz so much. It to me, it's more of just like a deep groove music.
Then cymbals.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on with the cymbals?
Wow. Let's see, I even have a little rope on it. It's a little shoestring, but typically I'd have it on some sort of gooseneck stand hanging. Do the honors for me. But typically you'll choke cymbal because you're actually choking it with the hand you're not playing with, and sometimes you can do it with like a stick in one hand, and even play the underside with the stick itself. But the basics, I guess you'd say, sound like this. Or even simpler.
You're not even letting go.
I'm not.
You're just choking it.
Hence choke cymbal. So you can even with some like the big spiderback stuff, the choke cymbal gets a little more active and kind of playing off like some serious syncopations, and I don't know, it's got this whole like kind of, for lack of a better term, like a funk to it, I think. But something like that. But
it's so exciting to me. Anyone who's actually watching this, I don't know if you saw the physics of that. You were not letting go. There's a lot of range while choking.
Well, yeah, you get to control you control like all the sound that it produces, so you can get so many interesting little sounds if you would hold it again. I'm holding it with my left hand, or if you're a lefty, maybe your right hand. But I mean. And then of course you have like up on hitting the shoulder of the stick on the top of the cymbal, or the bell. But the most common sound you hear is shoulder of the stick on the edge of the cymbal, kind of choked. You can get the hi-hat swing sound, kind of a fake version of that, but it's kind of the same thing you'll do. Once the hi-hats kind of came into style, you'd also use your left hand, maybe to hold both of the cymbals together to get kind of a sloshy sound, but you can do that same thing on one cymbal, and it sounds almost the same. So there's a lot of different things you can do with one cymbal.
When did the brushes come around?
They're around for as far as I know, pretty early on, from from the get-go. And they were originally
2 BC.
before...
Common time.
Yes, exactly.
Big 2.
Patient of early...
From the Civil War. Is that...
Kind of.
Did your great-great-grandfather undergo some sort of like surgical procedure with those?
Yeah, they were... But these are... I think they were originally designed... Like, you'll find old patent photos of... I think these being fly swatters. And you got one there? See how far it's come?
So drill, this is like the sonar. Excuse me, pardon me.
Wow. What is it?
Disregard all that. So, yeah, Andrew witnessed your playing. We came to Radio City, and everyone, we were in the, what do you call those, nosebleed seats. You were there.
The idiot boxes.
Idiot boxes.
Obstructed view or something like that.
He had a big pillar in front of
Yeah.
him. And you were there playing brushes, which is a strange choice for a place that
For
fits
radio
like 6,000
city, yeah.
people or whatever.
The projection, though.
Yeah.
You were playing with the dirty projectors. And so, yeah, what's going on with the brushes?
It's definitely like one of the more particular things to jazz drumming and from all eras. You don't hear it as much in other stuff other than country or indie rock. But I don't know, it kind of mimics the sounds that you will make playing like a press roll with sticks with the early stuff. And if I were to play the same music that is just a press roll going, but I'd go. Something like that, and you kind of get the buzz from the sweep. But typically, it's not like a modern jazz brush playing. Usually, is like that's kind of the Papa Joe Jones, or
Is he a big boy or
he was quite large.
He's a big boy?
I mean,
Big jazz.
as far as his
Stature.
jazz energy. But anyway, so that's kind of like the basics of that, is kind of keeping the space and so you have that. That's kind of what I think about mostly, and then if it starts, depending on the band, if it starts being more like a swing thing, I'll start doing the windshield wipers.
I'm watching the sea, 'cause the one I love soon comes.
Okay, it was really great having Chris Gelb here in the kitchen. We were having a good time talking about
What were you guys talking about?
I don't. We're gonna sort that out in the post-production. Papa Joe, Joe Jr. Who's the other Joe? Just Philly Joe.
Philly Joe Jones.
Yeah, Philly Joe. Yeah.
Do you ever resent not being a Joe?
It's hard to make it in this scene, not being a Joe, but we try our best.
You're a Mike.